The Old West was known for its colorful characters, and they often had unique names to set them apart. These nicknames, or aliases, often represented what that person did for a living, an event in their life, or described their personality, but sometimes it was just a name that stuck, regardless of how accurate it was. Here are the stories behind the nicknames of Dynamite Dick, Doc Holliday, White-Eye Anderson, Wild Bill, and Prairie Dog Dave. Daniel Dynamite Dick Clifton was an outlaw who made a name for himself as a member of the Doolin Gang in Oklahoma during the 1890s. Clifton was one of the outlaws at the Battle of Ingalls in Oklahoma in 1893. During the gunfight, Clifton was wounded, and 3 U.S. deputy marshals and 1 bystander lost their lives. Clifton was arrested in 1896 and was jailed at Guthrie, along with the leader of the gang, Bill Doolin. On the evening of July 5th, 1896, Bill Doolin organized an escape, bringing Clifton with him. There is debate over when Dynamite Dick was tracked down and killed by lawmen. Some believe he was killed on December 4th, 1896, and others believe it was on November 7th, 1897. Now, the most popular explanation as to why Dan Clifton was known as Dynamite Dick is that he used dynamite in his lead bullets. According to a newspaper article published in 1896, Dynamite Dick derived his name from the deadly manner in which he loaded his Winchester cartridges. In the bullet of each cartridge, he drilled a hole which he filled with dynamite. The hole was then plugged up with lead, and it became a double death-dealing instrument. Whenever the ball perforated the object at which it was fired, it exploded, tearing the object to pieces. Explosive bullets have been used in the past, notably during the Civil War. But did Clifton actually modify his bullets? Or was this just a good story to tell in the papers? In 1897, people were doubting the truthfulness of this explanation. Right here, it ought to be said that the account given in some of the territorial papers of the way Clifton came by the name of Dynamite Dick was pure foolishness. These accounts stated that he was in the habit of boring holes in his cartridges and filling them with dynamite. He never did anything of the sort, as I happen to know. That yarn was based upon the merest supposition for the reason that all of the men Clifton killed in close duels, and he killed nearly a dozen men in this way, had their carcasses badly shattered and torn. Clifton was a dead shot, and in close fights he always aimed for his man's throat or abdomen, and thus his bullets made bad, gaping wounds. But the dynamite story was entire fiction. There are easier explanations as to why Clifton was known as Dynamite Dick. Clifton was missing 3 fingers, and one story has it that he lost them playing with dynamite as a kid. Another story has it that he was thrown outside of a train while trying to blow up a safe. Or Clifton may have been the Doolin Gang's expert with dynamite. The exact reason for his nickname remains a mystery, much like the rest of the information concerning Dan Clifton. John Henry Holliday is recognized by the world as Doc Holliday. He is best known as a gunfighter slowly dying of tuberculosis, a friend of Wyatt Earp, a participant of the gunfight near the OK Corral, a heavy drinker, and a Western gambler. But before his diagnosis and his trip out west, he was a dentist. John Henry Holliday studied at the Pennsylvania College of Dental Surgery in Philadelphia, beginning on October 3, 1870. He was set to graduate on March 1, 1872, but Georgia law required licensed dentists to be at least 21 years old, and so Holliday had to wait 5 months until his birthday on August 14th before he was officially a professional dentist. This famous photo of Holliday was taken at the time of his graduation and was passed down through the family. Holliday practiced dentistry in his native Georgia, in St. Louis, Missouri, in Dallas, Texas, and even in Dodge City, Kansas. It was during his time in Texas, between 1873 and 1875, that Holliday became known as Doc, although many times it was spelled as D-O-C-K. When news of the gunfight near the OK Corral spread across the United States, he was referred to as Doc Holliday. When he was arrested in Denver for killing Frank Stillwell, the newspaper headline was, "How Doc Holliday, a notorious desperado, was run in." And when he died from tuberculosis in 1887, the headline was, "Doc Holliday, Dead." Many of the articles written about him never actually included his first name. He was known to the West and then to the world as Doc. John Joseph Foster White Eye Anderson is best known for his friendship with Wild Bill Hickok and being in Deadwood when Hickok was shot and killed by Jack McCall. White Eye Anderson wrote memoirs of his life out west, which were eventually published in 1980 in the book I Buried Hickok. According to his memoirs, Anderson got a job at Fort McPherson in Nebraska in the early 1870s. Still a teenager, Anderson worked for Mrs. Snell, the wife of the post sutler at the fort. Wishing for more excitement and to make more money, Anderson joined a group of hunters and trappers camped on Medicine Creek. One day when Anderson and his friend, Yankee Judd, went looking along other creeks in search of beaver and otter, they came across a band of Indians. They came yelling and shooting. Some had bows and arrows, and some had old guns. We had good horses and got away as fast as we could, but Judd got hit with an arrow in the calf of his leg. The wind was at our back and blowing hard, and the Indians could not overtake us, so they set fire to the tall, dead grass. We rode as fast as we could to get out of the hills onto level prairie. The fire was coming so fast we could not stop to backfire, for the wind was blowing very hard, and it would not be long until dark. We ran into a big buffalo wallow full of water. There was about half an acre of it, with water about a foot deep. We got off our horses as quickly as possible, turned them loose, and never saw them again. I had on a soldier's overcoat and lay flat down in the water on my back and pulled the cape of the overcoat over my head. I was underwater except part of my face. When I thought the fire had passed over us, I uncovered my face and raised up to take a look. The air was full of burning buffalo chips, and one that was just a live coal of fire struck me in the face, over my left eye. I stuck my head under the water as quickly as I could. It felt as if I had lost my eye. The pain was so awful. Anderson and his friend stayed until the fire burned out, and then traveled to a friendly camp of Indians about 15 miles away. The medicine man there helped treat Anderson's burn. They found some very fresh buffalo manure, mixed it up with some roots and a lot of blue, mushy clay, and pounded it into a pulp. A thick plaster was made out of the layout, and it was put on my face. I tell you, it was great stuff. Took the pain out and gave me comfort right away. The new hair that grew in on my eyebrow was white and very noticeable. The old medicine man had me stand before all the Indians, and he told them that the Great Spirit had marked me and that the mark would protect me. That is how I came by the name of White Eye. James Butler, Wild Bill Hickok, is one of the most famous lawmen and gunfighters of the Old West. Hickok was a celebrity in his own time, having appeared on the front page of Harper's New Monthly magazine in February of 1867. Although most of the events for which he is now known for hadn't happened yet in 1867, he is still given the name Wild Bill on the front cover. So what happened to Hickok before 1867 for him to be known as Wild Bill, even though his first name is James and not William? For the answer, we turn to Wild Bill historian Joseph Rosa. Rosa writes that Hickok was known as William or Bill since the mid-1850s, but the nickname of Wild Bill appeared later. His father's name was William Alonzo Hickok, but his father died in 1852, after which he began using the name William or Bill. As to why he was known as Wild Bill, there are a few different stories that offer an explanation. One story is that in 1862, while Hickok was in Independence, Missouri, a mob surrounded a saloon, looking to kill the bartender inside. A fight had just taken place inside the saloon, and the bartender wounded one of the men involved, the wounded man's friends forming the mob. Hickok stood in the doorway, pistols in hand, and fired 2 shots above the crowd. The mob dispersed. Later that evening, members of the town gathered to form a vigilance committee. Hickok was there, and his name was brought up. A woman in the crowd responded by shouting, "Good for you, Wild Bill." This is the most popular explanation, and one that follows how Hickok described the origin of his name. There is another story that Hickok's brother Lorenzo stopped a mob from lynching a young man accused of horse stealing, and that a woman in the crowd cried out, "My God, ain't he wild?" Later, the name began to somehow be ascribed to James and not Lorenzo. This supposedly happened when Lorenzo was working as a wagon master for General Fremont in the early part of the Civil War. And there is the story that while Hickok and his brother Lorenzo were in Rolla, Missouri in 1862, they called him Wild Bill and Lorenzo Tame Bill to keep them apart. No matter which story is correct, it was during his time in the Civil War that James Butler Hickok began to be known as Wild Bill. David Morrow, known in the Old West as Prairie Dog Dave, is best known for his nickname and for shooting an albino buffalo on the plains of Kansas. David Morrow moved from Syracuse, New York to Kansas around the early 1870s and became a buffalo hunter. He earned his nickname while at Hays City, Kansas. Morrow had captured 2 prairie dogs, tamed them somewhat, and then began giving speeches to travelers through Hays City about how great prairie dogs were as pets. One of the people he spoke to offered him $5 for the prairie dogs. $5 was a good amount of money in the 1870s, and so this motivated Morrow to go out and capture some more. Morrow designed a sand trap to catch the prairie dogs. He would place a barrel, opened at one end, and filled with sand over a prairie dog hole. As the sand poured in, the prairie dogs would escape, only to be blocked by the barrel, and the sand would fill in the hole. Morrow sold prairie dogs until he began to get competition, and the price dropped. From that time forward, David Morrow was known as Prairie Dog Dave. In the winter of 1872-1873, Prairie Dog Dave shot and killed an albino buffalo and brought the hide back to Dodge City. This was not the first time an albino buffalo had been shot and killed. In 1870 and 1871, albino buffalo had been sighted and killed in Kansas. Robert Wright, the owner of a general store in Dodge City, paid Morrow for the white buffalo hide, had it stuffed in Kansas City, and had it on display in his store window.